Today we're going to talk about Lebanon. It's not quite as hot a topic as Turkey, but for the many Lebanon files in this room, and I spot a few, it sometimes seems like the center of the world, and certainly for a country of, well, it's certainly in my heart. For a country of just 4 million people, it is so often in the news, tragically usually for the not very positive reasons. These days it's stable, although there's talk that this may be the calm before the storm. We recently had an analyst come and talk about Hezbollah and talk about the possibility of a war between Israel and Hezbollah. So that sort of lurks on the horizon. That was part of our Lebanon series, Lebanon sort of series panels that we've been doing. We've also been talking about the changing Lebanese-Syrian relationship and U.S. funding of Lebanese institutions like the Army. Today, we have somebody who's going to synthesize all of this, all that we've been exploring for the last couple of months. Paul Salem is a renowned analyst in Lebanon who has been invaluable to many of us journalists who were based there. I myself was based in Lebanon for years and went to Paul for objective and insightful viewpoints. One of his I think more famous quotes, one that I value, was during a period when March 14th and March 8th were struggling for power in Lebanon, and we said to him, please explain this, what's going on, and he said, well, it could really go one way or the other. And I thought that was very profound, and so it has. Paul is currently the director of the Carnegie Middle East Center, which produces very valuable research on the Middle East in both English and Arabic. Prior to joining Carnegie in 2006, he was the general director of the Ferris Foundation, and from 1989 to 1999, he founded and directed the Lebanese Center for Policy Studies, Lebanon's leading public policy think tank. Salim was a member of the Lebanese National Commission for Electoral Law Reform, a blue ribbon commission, tasked with revising Lebanon's electoral laws and proposing a new system. He's also held various positions at the American University of Beirut. He has published widely on many issues, conflict resolution, electoral issues in the Arab world, and of course the general Middle East situation. And he is the author of Bitter Legacy, Ideology and Politics in the Arab World, published by Syracuse University Press. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Paul Salem.
Thank you, Kate, and good morning, everyone. This room is small, like Lebanon, so the tensions of small countries and small places. MEI probably needs more funding, like maybe Lebanon likes to have to expand and have a wider environment. My opening remarks about Lebanon's politics in a shifting environment are intended to give some history and context and understanding to the dynamics, and more in the question and answer period get into what might be happening now, what might be happening in the immediate future. And my remarks will be divided into two parts. One is Lebanon's environment, and one is Lebanon's politics. Why is the environment so important for Lebanon? Other countries have their own politics, sometimes regardless of the politics of the environment. Well, that's because Lebanon, couple of reasons. One is its internal dynamics, divided country, different communities allied with different regional and international players. It's also part of the history of the country from the mid-19th century onward, without getting into it, that regional and international powers were part of the establishment of Lebanon, part of the politics of Lebanon, and that sadly has continued on and off and been part of Lebanon's reality and part of Lebanon's problems, and that is still the case today. In a more relevant vein, Lebanon lost its modern sovereignty after the 1967 war. The 67 war, of course, was a watershed moment for the entire Middle East, for the Arab-Israeli conflict. It was a watershed moment for Lebanon as well. Between 1943, Lebanon's independence, and 1967, Lebanon had preserved a precarious sovereignty and a precarious independence. By 1969, it had completely lost that sovereignty, lost control of its borders, lost control of its territory. And I would say principally that's because the conflict between Syria and Israel, which had been pursued directly through conflicts between Syria and Israel, became, as of the late 60s, a proxy war. And Lebanon has which lost its sovereignty in the late 60s, has still not regained its sovereignty. So this is a state which doesn't control its borders, doesn't control its territory, and that's a pretty serious problem, and that's a major reason why the environment very much affects the politics of Lebanon. And today Lebanon remains a compromised country which doesn't have that control. The period it lived through after 67 was a period, on one side, occupation, annexation, sort of Israel benefiting from the successes of 1967, and the Arab countries trying to deal with the after effects. Some chose peace, like Egypt and Jordan, and others chose a tougher stance, which was the Syrian position, which I would summarize as a position which by the 80s could be described as a very tough proxy war position to put pressure on Israel while trying to pursue the negotiation track with Israel at the same time. The Madrid peace process, and even much more recently, indirect talks mediated by Turkey. Syria pursues this two-pronged approach, mainly to get back its own occupied territory, which is the Golan Heights. Now, Lebanon, hence, lived that reality from the late 60s all the way up till today. That sort of situation, which, if you go through the end of the Cold War, at the end of the 80s, crystallized into a regional and international acceptance of Syrian control of Lebanon, basically between 1990 and 2003 or 2004, in which Syria continued its proxy use of Lebanon and at the same time was the dominant player in Lebanon. I'll come back to that a bit when we talk about Lebanon's politics. Of course, that changed after September 11 and particularly after the Iraq War in 2003. And Lebanon entered a period which was quite different than the post-67, 1980s, 1990s period, which was a period of very direct confrontation between a U.S.-led coalition, including Saudi Arabia, a group in Lebanon, Egypt, and others, and another coalition essentially led by Iran, including Syria, Hezbollah, Hamas, and others. That definitely impacted Lebanon very, very directly and was the cause for much of Lebanon's internal changes in the 2004-2008 period. So that was a very exceptional time, a very turbulent time, one which had a lot of risk, but also a lot of promise and a lot of potential. Now we're living in sort of 2008 and beyond period, which is U.S. ambitions scaled back, the neocon project to topple the regime in Iraq, and then maybe topple the regime in Syria, change or affect the regime in Iran, defeat Hezbollah. All of those grand ambitions, of course, came to naught. And by 2007 and 2008, it became clear that that Lebanon's environment would be one in which Syria would be very much surviving, very much back in business. U.S. ambitions scaled back, U.S. withdrawing from Iraq. Israel's attempts to defeat Hezbollah having failed, so Hezbollah definitely a major player in Lebanon, in the region. That has created the environment we're in now in Lebanon, which is an environment in which Syria has regained a very important position in the Levant. Syria has gained, of course, an important position in Lebanese politics and over Lebanese politics. Hezbollah very strong. The U.S. engaging Syria, Saudi Arabia engaging Syria, and Lebanon having to deal with that new reality. And indeed, we'll see, and as you've been following, Lebanese politicians having to come to terms with that.